Hey, welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. Today we are headed to Kentucky for 3 exciting encounter stories. How many of you have seen the documentary series called Hellier? I had plugged this high strangeness series on my social media platform. If you haven't seen it, go and watch season 1 and 2. It's a great series. Why am I mentioning Hellier? Because the strange events takes place mainly in Kentucky. Now, I know I sound like a broken record, but I want to thank all of you who have subscribed and clicked and watched my videos. Now, here's an interesting stat from YouTube regarding my viewers. They are saying that 69% are not subscribed. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and thank you in advance. Okay, now let's get to our 3 stories of the day. So go get yourself a treat or your favorite beverage and sit back and relax. All right, this first story takes place in the summer of 2019 in eastern Kentucky. I thought I'd share my mom's humanoid experience. I'll start this off by sharing that her home and my childhood home is definitely loaded with paranormal activity, and I plan to share more on that over on the paranormal subreddit. My mom's home is situated in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. She has one neighbor, her mother-in-law. There are no houses anywhere else around hers, just beautiful mountains. One night, her dog was barking, crying and growling. She just wouldn't stop. My mom was a tad confused as to there wasn't any outside noises that she herself could hear, and her dog was pacing to the door and windows. After about an hour, she decided to grab her flashlight and go outside to make sure everything was okay, and there weren't any animals messing with her trash bins. She figured her dog was picking up the smell of a raccoon or other nocturnal animals. She scanned her yard and the creek and didn't see anything out of place. No animals, and her trash hadn't been tipped over. She turned to go back into the house, and that's when she saw it. I will give the best description that I can from her explanation to me. I've never seen it myself and hope I never do. It was standing on its hind legs. Its back legs looked like an animal, and the front looked more human. It wasn't hairless, but looked as if it had mange with long fur here and there. The top half looked like a humanoid man, while the lower half looked like an animal. She stood paralyzed with fear, shining her light on it. It looked at her, and then it started walking on all fours out of her yard and into the mountains. As it did, it stopped and looked back at her, then finally disappeared into the darkness. Her second encounter wasn't as intense, but worth mentioning either way. It was weeks later when her dog began acting out again. She tries her best now not to go outside when the sun goes down. She turned her lights off inside and looked out of her kitchen window. With the light from her yard, she was able to see it again in her backyard, although it was further away from her and not as detailed. She said it had the same shape and look, and she knew instantly it was the same thing she saw just weeks earlier, and it ran chills down her spine. She said she closed her eyes and let go of her blinds, so they closed, for what felt like several minutes, and when she opened her eyes and pulled down the blinds to look back out again, it was gone. She said it took everything in her to open those blinds back up and look out. For weeks following, she would shoot her gun off right at the edge of darkness. Now, every time her dog acts out, she will scan her yard and then step out on the porch with her back door still open, just in case, and shoot her gun a couple times. She hasn't encountered it again. This took place in eastern Kentucky and happened in the summer of 2019. I will talk to my mom later tonight and ask her if there are any other details on its appearance that I've missed. It's been a while since I brought it up to her, as it makes her scared come nightfall, and she calls and keeps me up on the phone later than usual. All right, now this was an interesting encounter. I'm wondering if her mother saw a dog man, or was it something else? Because her mom does state that the lower part looked like an animal and the top part looked like a humanoid man. But nowhere in the description does it have what the actual facial features look like. Does the facial features look like a man? Or does it look like a dog? Anyways, we're going to go ahead and move on to story number 2. All right, this story takes place around the 15th of December of 2010, and it takes place in Pike County, Kentucky. In December of 2010, I think it was around the 15th or whenever the second muzzleloading season fell on during that year, I was going deer hunting on a private family property very close to Elkhorn City, Kentucky. This was my first time going hunting in a while, as I had given up the sport in my late teens, early 20s, and I would have been around 30 at the time of this sighting. The road that I had to travel is passable with a 4-wheel drive and is an old mining logging road. The terrain is typical Appalachian terrain, and the spot that I was headed to, where my tree stand was located, is on a ridgetop and somewhat flat from old mining operations, but very steep on one side of the road and somewhat flat on the other. I was hunting with a muzzle loader gun, and as I arrived at my parking spot in a steep curve in the road on a long what I call point, a natural crossing place for deer and other wildlife, I got out of the driver's side of my truck and walked behind my truck to get to the passenger door to get my gun and load it. I'm not sure of the time, but it was well before daylight. As I was attempting to load my gun, I heard what sounded like coyotes making a lot of noise, which is not uncommon, but these were close, and I have to admit that I've gotten spooked and hurried and got back into the driver's side of my truck. I locked the doors and flipped my headlights back on. My truck was facing the flat area with the point to my back and the steep hillside on my right. I cracked my window to listen for other sounds, and I heard more coyote sounds, and in about 2 to 3 minutes, I heard what I knew had to be a large creature coming from the flat area where my truck was facing. Keep in mind, the coyote sounds were coming from the same direction. Next, I saw something that I had never seen before or since. I saw a creature that had to be at least 8 feet tall. It came out of the wooded area towards the left side of my truck. The creature was moving at a quick speed, but when it came out of the clearing, it seemed to be shocked to see my truck, and it was apprehensive. It stopped for maybe 5 to 10 seconds and took off and disappeared behind me. The creature had the form of a really big man with long arms and longer hair that covered his whole body. It walked slumped over almost like it had a hunchback. My total time of seeing the creature was probably about 10 seconds. Since this occurrence, I have seen bear while hunting, and I can say for sure that what I saw that December morning was not a bear or anything else that I've ever seen in these hills and mountains. In a nutshell, the creature's gait looked like the Sasquatch reenactments that you see on TV. I truly believe that on that morning I saw a Sasquatch. I can't describe how I felt after seeing the creature. I wasn't scared, but I wasn't totally comfortable either. I suppose I can say I was bewildered. I should also mention, just before my sighting, I had taken some friends to our property to do some coon hunting. These guys had good dogs, but when we tried to turn them loose, they would not go out of our sight, and all 3 dogs returned to us within 10 minutes and would not hunt, which was unheard of for these particular dogs. This was probably around 2 months previous to my sighting. We also heard what sounded like rocks rolling down the hill in front of us, which was very steep for no apparent reason. Wow, that was another great hunting sighting. I have to say, a lot of these hunters, they come across Sasquatches probably more than most people. And that's because they're out there in the thickets. They're out in the areas where most people don't venture. All right, now let's get to the last story of the day. Okay, this story takes place in mid-month of October of 1994. And again, this takes place in Pike County, Kentucky. We were raccoon hunting and had turned our dogs out and let them get a head start. We gave them half an hour or so to let them get far enough ahead of us. We then got in the truck and started out on the road. You can only drive about 10 miles in a truck until the road becomes too narrow to pass. We got to where we had to turn the truck. There were 8 of us in the truck, 3 in the cab and 5 in the bed. We called the dogs but got no response, so we waited. About 30 to 45 minutes later, the dogs came running back to the truck with their tails tucked between their legs, like something had scared them to death. We loaded the dogs into the truck and had started back out of the mountain. We had only made it about 100 to 200 feet when the driver of the truck slammed on the brakes. We weren't going fast. I was in the back of the truck, not knowing what was going on. I looked into the back window of the cab and saw the 3 in the front of the truck pointing up ahead of us. So we, the folks sitting in the back, stood up and looked. What we saw was huge, standing about 7.5 to 8 feet tall. The color was hard to tell with the shadows, but I would say it was either black or dark brown. After about 10 seconds, the driver put the truck in reverse and backed up 50 feet or so. We all got out of the truck and asked one another if we all saw it. We all did, but we weren't sure what we had all seen. Some said a bear, some said Bigfoot. After about 10 minutes of talking about it, we got back into the truck and drove back to where it had stood. We got out of the truck and walked up to where we had seen it standing. There was a pool of water on each side of the road, but in the center was mud, and in the mud was a very large footprint, not a bear track. It looked like a huge human footprint, about 15 to 16 inches long. It had a very large big toe and only 3 small toes. We looked in awe at this track until we heard sticks breaking. This scared us, so we jumped back into the truck and flew away. We stopped a few miles away because we had a flat tire. While changing the tire, we all wanted to go back and see if we could see this thing again. So after we changed the tire, we headed back. We stopped the truck right before the place where we saw the footprint. We got out and looked for it, but you could barely see it. When we drove through it, we had destroyed it. But this told us that the creature we saw had made the footprint. The print was fresh when we saw it the first time. If the driver hadn't stepped on the brakes, the footprints would have been destroyed, and we would never have seen it, which added to the credibility of the creature's existence. We have gone back a number of times trying to see this creature again, with no luck. Maybe someday. I would like to say that I had never thought that I would see something like this, if this was a Bigfoot or not. I know that it wasn't a bear, and it wasn't anything that modern science knows about. I would never have given any thought to a story like this being true. But after seeing something firsthand that I have no answer for, I believe that there are Bigfoots in the Appalachian foothills. Man, what do you say to these 3 great stories which all came out of the Appalachian Mountains in Kentucky? I don't know, but there's some wild, crazy stuff happening out there. Okay, leave me your comments, guys, but that is going to be a wrap for today. So if you would like to share your encounter stories in a safe environment, please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. Your stories can be as anonymous as you would like, and I would love to hear from you guys soon. Bye for now, and we'll see you all next week.